Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Well, many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. One of the brilliant articles that's written in our Cities issue of the Journal of Biophilic Design, which is out now, was written by Dr. Wei Yang. You can purchase a copy directly from our website, it's journalofbiophilicdesign.com, or on Amazon as well. The links are on the spiel that goes with this podcast. Dr. Wang is an internationally renowned town planner, and she's also an urban designer and champions a place-based whole systems approach to tackle the grand challenges of our time. And we're really happy that she's joining us on the podcast today. Dr. Wang was president of the Royal Town Planning Institute and is an influential thought leader and powerful advocate for climate action, nature-based solutions, health and well-being, and social equality. She was also named Net Zero Hero by Digital Leaders in 2022, and this is very exciting, is going to become the first female chair of the Construction Industry Council. So go, girl.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm really thrilled to have you here, really am. People who are listening to this podcast know your name, which is amazing. I know your work as well, and know your advocacy too. So I would love to know a little bit about your journey. What got you into town planning? You know, what was kind of your inspiration?
Yeah, thank you. It's my great pleasure to talk with you today as well. Yes, my journey was quite interesting because when I was in high school, I wanted to be a botanist or archaeologist, but my mother wanted me to be an architect, so I applied for a degree in architectural school. And then I see the subject, there's one subject called town planning. I think, wow, that sounds very interesting because I like planning things. So yeah, so I applied to be a town planner, although without knowing what that meant. And then now I look back, I couldn't think of any other profession suits me better. So I was really lucky with that. So yeah, so about my journey, I was trained in China, in Xi'an, for my first degree. So I was trained initially as an architect. So the first 3 years, we were taught about how to design buildings from small to large. And then the final years, we will learn about urban design and mass planning and the planning and about historical environment and also natural environment, transportation. So it's quite a comprehensive education. And then I came to the UK in 1999 to study my master's and also PhD afterwards in Sheffield University. So after that, I went to Milton Keynes. I worked 7 years as an urban designer for some very large-scale mass plans in the UK for 7 years. And because I lived in Milton Keynes, and it's a very good place for town planners because you see a brand new city and how it works and then how it didn't work. So you actually you start to think about, if I do design something like that, what I should do. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic place for a town planner to be. So from there, I start to realize the unlocked potentials of town planning because because Milton Keynes was the last new towns in the UK. And then the New Towns program was very much inspired by the Garden City movement. So I started from New Towns to trace back to the principles of garden cities and then to have some deep research about garden cities. And I was fascinated by the concept of garden cities because I think the approach taken by the garden cities are still so relevant to the challenges we want to tackle today. And then, of course, it was designed a century ago. But I think if we could adapt some fundamental principles and then relate that to the 21st century context in terms of the new challenges and also the new technology, we could really create a new model. So in 2011, I decided to set up my own company, Wei Yang and Partners, to focus on the 21st century garden city model. So I invented this 21st century garden city model and use that as an integrated mass planning approach for my firm. And then from there, we were one of the finalists of the Wolfson's Economics Prize in 2014 on garden cities. And also we use that approach to do some very large scale master plans, very much focus on urban-rural integrated development in China and some other countries. And we were instrumental in helping the informing the Chinese national spatial planning reform on thinking about a much more holistic and ecologically focused approach to the overall environment. So yeah, so from there, and I just thought, I strongly felt the planning profession need to be modernized. So I decided to put myself forward as the president of the Royal Town Planning Institute. So I was elected, and I wrote a manifesto. And then from there, in my manifesto, I said we need to focus on the modernization of the planning profession. And one of the key things is digitalization. So I set up a digital task force for planning with Professor Michael Betty. So we are doing quite a lot on that. And then, yeah, I'm also very keen because through my whole career, I was very interested into interdisciplinary collaboration and then thinking research. And I'm very keen to foster research into practice. So I felt we should do more between different professionals and different professional bodies. Yeah, so I was kind of putting myself forward again to be the chair of the Construction Industry Council. So this is where I am.
It's fantastic. I love that. Like you say, you wanted to make a change, so actually you stepped up to the plate and said, "Do you know what? Let me have a go." And doing it better. Actually, Professor Michael Batty is written in the same magazine, same issue as you. So, listeners, if you want to find out a little bit more about that too, please do buy the journal. A really amazing way what you've done. I do want to ask you before we go into the other questions. Can you kind of explain what a garden city to you is? What your sort of 21st century kind of garden city kind of vision is, to kind of give people like an overview of it, please.
Yes, there are a lot of misunderstanding about the garden cities, because quite often people perceive garden cities are places with lots of trees. Of course, that's one of the characters of garden cities. But essentially, garden city is a social economic model. So it's focused very much on the long term of the community building, and also using the land value capture to really enable that to happen. To say, yes, through, because just very simple. So a new development, when it started, so start from scratch, and then the land would worth not very much. But through development, the land value will increase significantly. But rather than the developer capture all this land value increase, so if that land value can be captured for the community purpose through different mechanism, and then through the years, the income generated through land value increase can benefit to the community, and that would really help to enhance many social economic kind of support to the community. And also relate to the 21st century, because 21st century we have more challenges, much more severe challenges like climate change, biodiversity decline, and also aging population. So I believe having this land value capture can help us to think about community welfare in a much more comprehensive way relates to the local need. Because sometimes if you think about social welfare from the state perspective, it can be very high, kind of a top-down approach. So may not be necessarily need what the community requires. So if we do have a local approach, and we can really fit that with the community's need. And also 21st century, we have so many advanced technologies which can be used to enhance the convenience of our community. Because I believe we should benefit from technology, but not necessarily driven by technology. Technology is serving people for people's need. So I think that's the key thing. Want to focus in the 21st century garden city. So it's a people-centric approach about community, about the environment.
That's wonderful. I think, like you say, I think having things more locally based, they're kind of more autonomous, people understanding what needs are, as well, because obviously it changes where you are. It's like in every family, isn't it? I always think of communities
Yes.
like families. Where we live here, the community is very strong, which is lovely. But people look out for each other, and there's different needs, and even different parts of this town. So yeah, I think by having like a massive overview, massive umbrella thing for the whole country, for the whole nation, for the whole world is not going to work. I mean, we need an overriding kind of policy, maybe, what we like the targets, the net zero targets and things like that. But actually, in order to be able to achieve that, and also to help our citizens flourish, I'm completely with you on that one, to have it localized. I've got to ask you, what's your biggest frustration when it comes to sort of town and urban planning? I mean, this is a massive question. So answer this as you will.
Yes, yes, I was reminded about this every day. Yes, I think the frustration really come from the misunderstanding of planning again, because it's actually very relevant to what I said about there are lots of misunderstanding about garden cities, because garden city principles were almost like the foundation of the modern town planning profession. So I said it's very much about compassion and selflessness. So it's really about serving community rather than making benefit for certain small groups. So my frustration now, I believe, is the frustration of the general profession, is the kind of lack of understanding about the potentials of spatial planning. And also quite often people perceive planning as an administrative and also bureaucratic exercise or serving developers. But actually, this is not what planning is about. So planning, I think, is a multidisciplinary discipline. So cutting across between social, environmental, and the behavior sciences. So it's an applied science discipline. So it's a part of science, and also it's art. So you really have to manage between scientific evidence with people's need. So I think it's a very highly sophisticated profession. But because it's so sophisticated and because it's cutting across so many different disciplines, and it's people found difficult to understand or perceive what it's all about.
Yeah. I suppose where you say is collaboration is where it comes in, isn't it? Bringing all their heads together. You mentioned compassion and selflessness, and obviously I know you're really passionate about the environment, and obviously Biophilic design, it obviously ticks all those boxes. In the article that you wrote for our cities edition of the Journal of Biophilic Design, which is out now, readers, the town planners should be doctors for Mother Earth. I thought that was beautiful when I read that. I had to read it 6 times. I love that. Town planners should be doctors for Mother Earth. And you also mentioned about them being artists, having an art side of things as well. So town planners as doctors for Mother Earth, what does that mean in real terms? What mindset should they be adopting, and what should they be considering?
Yes, I think if you think about the scope of the profession, I believe the fundamental objective of the profession is to create a balanced system for people, nature, and society to coexist in harmony. Because as we said, the profession is so sophisticated, and then we have to deal with so many different things and different stakeholders. But sometimes when you think about a complex issue, it's better think about from some very simple approach. I think if really we need to think about actually who matters or what matters in planning. So I think only 3 key things matters is people, nature, and society. So if we get this balance right, and then this is what we ultimately want to achieve, this is harmony for these 3 key elements. And then so from there, you can get our priority right. So everything have to start from nature, because we are part of nature, and then without nature, we cannot survive. So I think the fundamental issue is about our survival. And then, so I think it's about our mindset change, because quite often as human beings, we are very selfish. We're just taken from nature without giving back to nature. So that really caused all these problems we have now. So I think why I say I see planners as doctors, because I think we are doctors for our Mother Earth. So if we see our Mother Earth, our planet, as a human body, I think it's easy to perceive that way. So if we imagine our Mother Earth as our birth mother and a human being, then soils are her muscles, and river systems are her blood vessels, woodlands are her hair, and then we think our cities, towns, and villages are the organs in her body. So everything is part of a holistic, integrated, and interconnected ecosystem. So from that way, you will see actually that's why we have to bring the beauty of nature and bring wildlife corridors into city, because they have to be connected. At the moment, quite often we treat cities, especially large cities, as almost like a cancer because they're just like a block, concrete block. But that's why they have such a lot of trouble. So as human beings, we live in cities. Quite often we have mental health issues, and we are not connecting both mental and physical health issues. So if we do bring nature into our cities, towns, and villages, and then we can treat the whole environment in a totally different way. And then the role of planners would be very different. The approach we take will be very different.
Yeah, really, really good. Do you have an example of where town planners have really adopted that Mother Earth principle?
Yes, yes. So go back to the garden cities. For the first garden city, that was garden city, I think used that approach. So now after over 100 years, the city is thriving and economically as well. And also it sits perfectly in a natural environment. And also one thing about is this connectivity to the local agricultural land. So actually the name of garden city is not because the gardens in say in our household. A garden actually means the agricultural belt around the cities. So actually the city sits in this garden kind of agricultural or rural context. I think that's where the name came from. And so at the moment that's very relevant. So relates to local food production, because we know importing food will cause enormous amount of carbon emission and footprint. So, for example, local food production is a very good approach, and also walkable neighborhoods, because I think at the moment there's a concept called 15 minutes walkable neighborhood, 15 minutes neighborhood. So I believe that started from garden cities, because garden cities was all about walkability. So you can walk to your from your house to your work on a daily basis, and also about because garden city is not one city, so it's not a city in isolation. It's a social network. So when Howard he drew his diagram, he called social cities. So it's like a several garden cities that are connected by public transit, and then through this rapid public transport system, they are connected to larger cities. So it's like a network of cities. But that's again very relevant to what we want to encourage today with public transport. So I think that's a good example. And also in terms of land value capture. So because the whole Letchworth Garden City, apart from the private homes, the only other commercial estate and also the parklands and also the surrounding agricultural land belongs to the Heritage Trust. So each year they can generate a good income. And then if we reduce that to the expense and everything else, they can still have £7 million surplus. And these £7 million are used for local communities' need and the reinvestment into the refurbishment of commercial properties, and also upgrading or improving the public realm in the area. So as you can see, actually this model really works successfully. So another good example is Milton Keynes, because Milton Keynes used lots of garden city principles, but to a larger scale. So the Milton Keynes considered multifunctionality in terms of the green space. So the green space in Milton Keynes are not only for leisure purposes, but also is for flood attenuation and also for wildlife corridors. I think that's a great approach to think about how we can use very limited land to achieve multifunction. And also Milton Keynes used the land value capture model as well. So there was a trust called the Parks Trust was created to help look after the green spaces in Milton Keynes. So although Milton Keynes has a higher percentage of green space, is about a quarter of the land in the city, But because they have this land value capture model, so each year the Parks Trust, they generate income from local centers, the commercial kind of premises there, and also some other income. So they can use this income to look after the green space professionally. That's why Milton Keynes is such a lavish city. So I think all this really shows how we can take a long-term integrated approach when we consider mass planning and it relates to the city or the towns or villages to the wider ecological context.
I think it's a great idea that you say there's the land value, so how you can use those green spaces to actually generate income, which will then benefit the community. So I'm actually just going to ask you now, obviously, what's the impact it's been on the people and also on the environment. It's really refreshing to hear though that there's kind of the value approach, because it's very easy to talk about the well-being and it's all that sort of, which we all know about now, which is great. But I'm also now, as more and more debates are happening, it's like, yeah, it's great talking about it, but how do I swing that if I'm trying to do this, make a difference in a town or in a city to the people that are going to sign it off, basically. So if like you just said, there are two examples there. There's Letchworth and there's Milton Keynes, and there are many others. But this model of actually using the land to generate funds which self heal or self protect the buildings, and then the garden spaces, and then also the communities. So yeah, if we can maybe move on then to how it affects the people, the people who are actually using it. Do we have any evidence of that, or what's been your kind of feedback on that and the environment that garden cities have?
Yes, I think the because I think green space or accessibility to green space will affect our behavior, and I think, as you said, will affect our physical and mental well-being. I think if we see from the other way, because sometimes we take things for granted. So if you live in a nicer environment and then green space on your doorstep, so you just do that, and then I don't. Another thing is because we do have some expensive neighborhood, and then we are normally refer as leafy neighborhood. Yeah. So they are normally quite expensive areas, so people love them. But I think green space is so important to everyone, and that's why the pioneers like Olivia Hill, she helped to protect the green spaces in London, because she argues we have to really provide this on people's doorstep. Otherwise, you cannot expect people, especially people from disadvantaged background, they have to pay transport to go to enjoy this green space. It should be accessible to everyone. I think that's a fundamental principle we should carry on in town planning. And also, there is evidence to show actually children, they develop mental health issues in early stage of our life. At the moment, there's a research shows 74% of the children in England, they play outside for less than 1 hour per day. That's horrendous, because the UN's guidance for prisoners is to have exercise at least 1 hour per day. So children, their freedom is less than prisoners. So we really have to encourage them to enjoy nature, because if we want our future generations to look after our nature, and then if they don't understand nature and they don't appreciate that, how on earth they can protect it? So I think that's fundamental. And also, as I said, long-term nature or accessibility to outdoor space will change our behavior. And it's kind of like chicken and egg issue. There's a research from Sheffield, from a professor in Sheffield University, shows in 4 generations' time, our ability as children to wander around has reduced significantly. So for the great-grandfather, George, when he was 7 or 8, he was allowed to walk 6 miles to go fishing by himself. But after the 100 years, his great-grandchild Ed, he was only allowed to walk within 300 yards, not to the end of his street, because perceived was not to be very safe if he goes further without an adult. But it's so important for children to be able to play independently without without adults, without their parents, because that could help you to explore the nature by yourself and also to be more independent. And then, so I think that's so important. When I was a child, I always play with my brother only. My parents was never there. So we do enjoy something quite adventurous, quite dangerous, but it's really great. So I think we need to encourage children to take some kind of manageable risk. And then actually through learning through risks, you can really have a much more better judgment about what you should do as an adult or as a children. So I think all these are essential part of our kind of mental health development. So yeah, so I think we have to really to provide adequate space to encourage that in a with a safer, relatively in a relatively safer environment.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, if there's more children playing, there'll be more people out there. There'll be more people looking out for each other as well. So it would actually create a safer space.
Yes.
And the whole equity messaging as well is actually to encourage people to go and use it as well. Because some people also feel if they've never used it, how do I use it? How do I access it? You know, I mean, like you, I mean, I used to go and play. We'd go and play in the woods. I'd go, you know, play in the gardens. Well, mum and dad would like often, yeah, I'm an only child, so it was me and my dog, but they were always close, they were nearby, but I was allowed to go off and explore on my own and always came back. But I had that beauty, you know, yeah, I had that gift, I suppose. I think that's the word I'm going to use. I had that gift of being able to fall over logs and stuff and play in leaves and just look and sit on the floor as well and look at the little bugs and stuff. And I think that's
yes, I do.
Yeah,
Yes.
about
Yes.
the garden cities is that you can bring that right to someone's doorstep. You know, you don't
Yes.
have to go
I
miles.
know.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And also the environmental messaging as well. It's obviously it improves biodiversity, doesn't it? And you know, it helps reduce heat islands and you know helps runoff, helps increases the porosity of earth and cities. And yeah, it's just there's so many win-wins, isn't there, when we bring biophilic design into cities, which is the garden city messaging in effect, isn't it, really? So what do you think are the greatest barriers? People are going to be listening to this going, probably got a gazillion things going, well, I've tried to do this and I've tried to bring in a plant and I've tried to bring in a pocket park and I've tried. For you, what do you think are the greatest barriers to how we can, you know, plan our cities and towns better? Are there sort of common challenges that town planners face when they're trying to do the right thing for people and planet?
Yes, I think the common challenge is the professional and the departmental silos.
Yeah.
So because we have quite no, so from say top down, we have different departments and also we have different professions. So everybody try to resolve their own issue without really effective communication or data sharing. So if we tackle one issue just from one side, actually you may miss opportunity. Actually, you may do something, maybe have bad consequence for longer term. I always use an example. So example, if there's a street, a bit of high street, have traffic jams every morning because there was a primary school next door. And then, so if you were asked to find out what is the solution, and then the easy solution will be just open a big car park, so all the parents they can just park their cars without blocking the street. But there's another solution. Could be why don't we look what caused the traffic jam, and then to see actually whether we can create a much more friendly pedestrian environment, so children they can be walked to school without need to drive, and then that would really resolve many different other issues. So it's really about how you ask the question and how you try to find a much more integrated solution to think about many other issues. It's really about weighting and judgment and also trade-offs. So I think this is why I believe planning profession is so important, because it's not about tackling one issue, it's a place-based approach. So we could really consider, especially from the people's and the environment's perspective, about what is the best solution and working with different professionals to find that best solution.
So that's the best way to address it, really, then, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's multidisciplinary approach. So that's why I think so the frustration is this silo approach, and then secondly is really the skill set we should have within the planning profession. I believe we should have leadership and facilitation skills. So for you to be able to work with all the different other professions. You have to understand all the principles, so we can really share the same language.
Do you think that might come from like universities and where people are training to be town planners? Do you think, I mean, the next generation or the people who are training, I say next generation, I don't mean that in an age group. I just literally mean people who might be retraining into town planning or cross from a discipline into town planning. Do you feel like that should be coming from those academic institutions?
I think it should come both ways. Of course, should come within the planning profession itself, and also, of course, education institute play a key role in that. For example, I know there are a lot of say universities or education institutes. They are already taken this approach. For example, like UCL, like there was a new school called university called London school, interdisciplinary school. Yeah, so they all try to take that approach. I think that's fantastic. And also, it's really about how we want to use these skills and how we want to encourage these skills. So yeah, I think the key drive needs to come from within the profession itself.
Yeah,
There's a fundamental change. I think it is part of the key things I argued and in my argument in terms how or why planning profession need to be modernized.
absolutely. Well, I think, I mean, you've made such an impact already, Wei. I mean, really, you have, people talk about you, and you're a real leader in that space, and you're very, you're outspoken and strong, and people listen to what you're saying, and I really hope the people listening to the podcast will go off, and I'll put links on the podcast, on the spiel that goes with the podcast, but we'll follow up on your story and your practice and your research papers and things that you've written as well. And also I encourage people to buy the cities edition of the Journal of Biophilic Design, which has Wei's article in it. I've said that 6 times, I think, in this podcast, so hopefully somebody might buy it. How do you feel nature affects us as humans? So I'm just bringing this back as a very personal thing. I mean, what sort of positive impact does it have on us when we're surrounded by a natural habitat? And you can answer that personally as well. So
yeah, I just feel it brings you energy. Because every day you see something growing, and then from such a small seed, such a vulnerable kind of small shoots, and then become a big tree. I think there's nothing more kind of fascinating or fantastic or magical than the nature, the power of nature. So we all have that power. I think we just need to be more connected to nature to explore our own power.
That's really nice. I'm going to ask you the final question in a second, the one I ask everybody, which is my favorite part of the podcast as well. Is there anything else you would like to add before I get to that point?
No, I just want to maybe add one thing, because I think, as you mentioned, I'm going to be the first chair of Construction Industry Council, but I think actually, so when I research on the history of garden cities and also the history of many, say, social, environmental, and behavioral science, or generally about science and technology, quite often the pioneers they were men. But I think there is no age and gender difference in our spirit, no race difference in our soul. So as long as we believe ourselves, we can all make a lasting difference. So I think as girls, as people from anywhere, I think if we believe something, I think we just work on it. I think we can all achieve something collectively.
That's beautiful. That's really lovely. So, yeah, final question then. If you could paint the world, and I'm really interested to hear what you say about this, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Yes, I would like it to be a place where humans coexist in harmonious nature. So we do have abundance of greeneries and also plants and trees of all shapes and sizes thriving in every corner of our earth. And also wildlife can live in harmony with people. So none of us, let's say, actually, I'm your master. I am controlling you. Actually, we're all just enjoying the world together.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.